Hi everyone, it's Vesper. Nice to see you again. I'm sorry that my videos are so sporadic. I'm afraid that that's not going to change anytime soon. But today I thought I'd make a video thinking aloud about something kind of random that's been on my mind. I'm going to try and keep this video and my videos in general shorter, but you know, I'm not good at that. I've been saying that for forever. Anyway, something that's been floating around my mind in recent months is how in LGBTQIA communities, we acknowledge that questioning is a thing, or at least sometimes we do. Sometimes we include it in the acronym, ascribing it to the Q in LGBTQIA, if we even include the Q at all. Even though we acknowledge that questioning is a thing, sometimes, or at least some of us, don't really talk about it. Some people do, and that's great, but I feel like a lot of people don't talk about questioning. Be it as an identity in and of itself, or as a state of being that doesn't necessarily have a start or finish point. And I say this including myself because I feel guilty of also not really talking about it. Questioning is often, if not almost always, considered to be something that one actively does, as opposed to passively. That is, if someone is questioning their sexuality, gender, what have you, they are actively contemplating it, trying to figure it out. And once they have figured it out, they will cease to identify as or consider themselves to be questioning. And that makes sense linguistically. Questioning is something that one generally actively does in regards to anything, especially when it comes to sexuality and gender. Questioning is considered to be, or at least viewed as if it's a transitional state that has a definitive start and an end, in which you are in between identifying as A and identifying as B. And there is motion in between these two things that you are consciously trying to make in order to get to B. And along with that comes the assumption, often unspoken, that once you have reached B, you will never talk about having ever been a part of community A, because option one, maybe you never actually were A, you just mistakenly thought you were A. Or option two, even if you do feel that you were A at that point in time in the past and simply aren't any longer, you still don't talk about having ever been A because you do not want to inadvertently put your voice out there and that voice be uplifted higher than people who are A now. And then there's option three. Regardless of whether you feel that you were or weren't actually A in the past, you don't want to speak to having ever been or identified as A because you know that there are people out there who will take that and use it as ammunition against people who are A or who are B. You don't want your experience of having been A but now being B used to invalidate others or even yourself. Of course, I also want to give a head nod to options 4, 5, 6, 7, 1000 because I'm sure there are any number of reasons why someone might not talk about questioning, having ever questioned, or having ever identified as something else in the past that I am not mentioning in this video. There are no shortage of options, and I say options, but really I mean reasons why one may only talk about oneself in the present as opposed to in the past, no matter how important that past may still be to them in the present. Anyways, this has been on my mind recently because despite how much I talk about pretty personal things on this channel and online in general, I have noticed that I shy away from talking about having ever questioned or how I've identified in the past as opposed to how I identify now, etc., etc. I'm especially frustrated, or rather annoyed with myself, over the reasons why I have shied away from talking about these things. All of the reasons that I gave apply to me for various things and various reasons. And especially as someone who puts themselves out there on YouTube, online, it feels like to not talk about having ever questioned or any changes in identity serves as a huge disservice to those who are consuming whatever content I'm putting out there on the internet and who are themselves questioning or who are or have experienced changes in identity in silence and don't feel themselves really having anyone to look to who has also dealt with similar things. Because most people talk about being set in having a certain identity and 100% identifying as that, whereas that's not everyone's experience. And I don't know, I feel like it would be great if I'd also talk about the times where I haven't been 100% certain of being whatever, or the times that I may currently not be certain about something and how that's like. At the same time, as much as I want to talk about these things, I kind of struggle with whether my experience with having ever identified as a matters at all, because I don't want to put my voice out there and it being heard more loudly than the people who are a now, because yeah, it would be shitty to speak over people who are a. But at the same time, I feel like the experiences of people who once identified as something but do not now also hold value. So yeah, balancing act, I'm not good at it. So I just didn't bother to balance it at all and didn't talk about stuff. But then again, me not talking about having once identified as X, Y, or Z, or being in the process of questioning or not being 100% certain that I am, I feel like not talking about it is not helping the matter. That there is stigma, taboo, kind of pressure, peer pressure, whatever pressure, to not talk about those things. Like, my silence is not helping anyone talk about those things more. So yeah. I've more or less made it a resolution, New Year's resolution, personal challenge to be more open and to talk about these things more. And that means being more vulnerable. I don't want to just talk about the past. I also want to talk about the present and the future as much as I can. I'm really not good about even conceptualizing a future at all. That's another topic that I kind of want to talk about at some point in the future. But more generally speaking, not just in regards to gender and sexuality, I would like to talk about self-discovery more. Because up until now on this channel, especially to a lesser extent on my blogs, I've never really talked about this kind of thing except in the moment when maybe a change or something happens and I might mention it briefly, but then never speak of it again. I think it was my second video on this channel where I did briefly mention having identified as demisexual before eventually settling on identifying as asexual. And then I have never spoken of having ever identified as demisexual again. So most of you may not even know that I ever did. Or another example, I did make a video about having once identified as neutra and how I ceased to identify as neutra and started to identify as maverick. And I talked about that. I dedicated one whole video to that, and I haven't really talked about that at all since then. Recently, I did make a video about no longer identifying as biromantic, panromantic, but I buried that amidst a rant talking about something else, when really there's a lot more to be said about that topic and how I came to that change in identity. As it's a new year and I have undergone a lot of self-discovery in the past year and just experienced a lot of new things and have been thinking about this kind of stuff a lot because of being on T for the past year and being in a new relationship. I feel like it's high time that I start talking about stuff, especially since I'm about to undergo a huge change in my life. So yeah, going to try to get over myself and be more open, talk about things in 2019. And next weekend I will make a life update video about the huge change that I'm about to undergo. But more importantly, I would like to talk with you guys and ask you, are there things that make you self-conscious about talking about, questioning? If you have undergone numerous identities en route to your present identity, do you feel awkward about talking about those past identities? Do you ever talk about those past identities? Do you feel like you were in the past that past identity but just aren't now? Or is it more of you mistakenly thought you were that past identity and actually you never were? I'm just really interested in other people's experiences with questioning and change in general. So if you are comfortable talking about that and you would like to share, please feel free to share in the comments of this video. I would love for there to be more open discussion about this kind of stuff. Not just between you and me, but with each other in general. So yeah, please feel free to comment. Thank you for watching, and I will be back next weekend with an update video. In the meantime, stay awesome, take care, and thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye. Okay, random talk. Calcife is at my feet right now, digging at the fucking carpet. Being a bad boy because he wants attention. He always gets jealous when I talk to a webcam, when I talk on my phone, when I talk to a camera. Such a jealous cat, Calcife.